Growing a business is hard, but it does not have to be. Once a week, we take a break from the hustle and bustle in business to talk about innovations and what's new in the C-suite. This is the Fractional C-Suite Retreat, and I'm Joseph Frost. Pull up a seat at the fire, grab a drink, smoke a cigar, and just join me as we relax, learn, and get inspired. This retreat is sponsored by your CMO, helping organizations grow with better marketing strategy.
Welcome. I'm excited about my guest today. He is a servant-hearted leader, helping people get what they want and what they need. His vast array and variety of experience across many different industries makes him a very effective sales leader. He's trying to develop a business and a way of life, making good new things, he likes to say. Welcome, Tom Daly, Fractional Chief Revenue Officer. Glad to have you here.
Joseph, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm excited about our conversation today. I always enjoy talking with sales leaders, particularly because marketing and sales are so important to be aligned within an organization. So we'll get into that in a second. But before we begin, if you could share with me what's something of interest to you or something you're focused on right now that you think other C-suite leaders should be thinking about today.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I always think about it because you and I are in that same space as many C-suites. They are, at their very core, they're entrepreneurs. They are really unusual. They're that Swiss Army knife. They can do many, many things pretty darn well. And that's why they're able to succeed initially. And the thing that I'm working on is really that transition from entrepreneur. We'll always have that capability, but transitioning to the visionary, taking organizations and initiatives, really becoming that chief cheerleader. I always kind of think about Walt Disney, right? The vision, the excitement, that's it. And that's what he did. And then in the background, we also had Roy Disney, who's actually making the trains run on time. But to get from that entrepreneurial spirit of doing to the visionary where you're showing the way, that's a critical movement that all entrepreneurs need to do. I work with it every day. I try to do that on a regular basis. So really getting that C-suite to be in that visionary chair is really critical. And I'm working on that a lot. And I love having those conversations with C-suite leaders.
Yeah, I think I love that topic because I talk about that a lot when I speak to groups of business owners. And if you're familiar or other members of the audience are familiar with the book E-Myth, I think it's one of the best books on entrepreneurship that was ever written, and it's still shared today very prominently. But in the book E-Myth, the entrepreneur's dilemma is, how do you get out of doing the work to building the systems and managing those systems, so then becoming that leader and entrepreneur? And many entrepreneurs I know have done that piece of it. They've gotten out of the technical work. They've built the systems and they have management, but now they're the leader in their organization. They're that in that C-suite. But what I like to say is now they're wearing all the C-suite hats, or too many C-suite hats. So because it's a small organization or a growing organization, they have to be nimble, but they're doing sales, they're doing operations, they're doing IT, they're doing finance. And over time, they build leaders underneath them, but many times they're still doing one too many things, they're wearing one too many C-suite hats. And until they can remove that hat and give it to somebody else, they're always going to be in it. And our jobs, I think, as fractionals, is to make them aware of that and then also take that hat off sometimes and put it on ourselves so they can be that visionary that you're talking about. And at that level, they're back to growing the business, taking the next big steps, seeing what's around the corner. But when they're inside the C-suite, not inside their business, they sometimes don't see what those opportunities are the same.
Yeah, I love that because the E-Myth, you're right, is required reading for any business owner. Quick read in a story format, so it really gets the point across. And I love to say that I lived the E-Myth. When I was an entrepreneur, I made all of those mistakes. And that's why I think it makes us really strong advisors. We've been there. We felt the pain. We made the decisions we shouldn't have, realized our mistakes. And now, as an advisor, we come to our C-suite partners, prospects, et cetera, with this scar tissue that is super valuable to say, we know what not to do. We're going to give you the opportunity to make your own mistakes on your own, right? But that's really the key, that giving them perspective of like, I know how you're feeling. been there, and it's hard, and making that transition is difficult. But I'm here to tell you that there is a pathway, but it usually requires a coach or so, or an accountability partner, or whatever phraseology you like out there. It requires that. And then really, as we both know, the commitment. Are you committed to doing it differently? Because a lot of times we're like, yeah, I love change. It's wonderful. Oh, it affects me. Well, now that's a different matter, right? And so we really have to be committed to get to that uncomfortable spot because the rewards are so worth it.
Yeah. I have a friend, her name is Michelle Hecken, and she's been on the show before, and she talks about offboarding. I always felt that was a really interesting way to think about it also, because as CEOs and as owners and as other C-suite leaders, you have to offboard yourself as you're onboarding somebody to replace you. And it's just as difficult to offboard as it is sometimes to onboard. So there's a process that you go through. And I've seen, with our work as a fractional CMO, with our work with owners, oftentimes it's the owner that's wearing the marketing hat when we get into those organizations. We're generally that first strategic marketing leader that an organization will have. And it's hard for the CMO to offboard that hat to another senior leader because they're so intimate with it, and it's comforting to know all of the detail. But in order for them to truly elevate to that visionary again and look around the corner and grow the company, they got to offboard that responsibility. I found that the key component is trust. And once they start building trust in that new person, then they can finally release. But if the trust isn't there, they'll always be looking over their shoulder, always be second guessing their decision. And it's hard to do when it's something you love so much. As a CEO, marketing is what most that their organization was probably built upon as an entrepreneur, at least their understanding of the market. Sales is no different. Most of the senior CEOs and owners that I know that have started companies, their biggest strength is sales. And so for them to offboard that sales role, that sales leadership, not necessarily the role, they might have plenty of sales people underneath them, but that leadership and the strategy, it's hard for them to offboard that. Do you see that as well?
I do. And it's so funny because I couldn't agree more. Going back, maybe extending the analogy of the Swiss Army knife, that transition point, and this is it's an ego play. It's a different thing because as that Swiss Army knife, again, you're pretty good at a lot of stuff. You can see around corners. You can do things that nobody else can do. And that visionary role is uniquely you. There's no one else that can do that. So you must go there. And I think we can agree to that. However, that offboarding piece, that's really the ego play, because not only are you going to transition to somebody else, but the objective is to transition that duty or that skill, that marketing, that sales to an individual that will be eventually far better than you ever were in that role. And that's how an organization continues constant improvement. We keep bringing on role players that are far better than the entrepreneur was initially, but he got the ball rolling. He got the flywheel turning, or she, you get it up there. And the new people coming on have to actually be better, so the expectations are high. And you have to be willing to admit that and say, thank goodness we have you here. You're far better than I ever was, and that's why we're better. That can be a hard thing to our egos sometimes to make that transition.
Yeah. I'm curious because I think the fractional model addresses it so well. But in your experience, do you look at that transition from a CEO or owner to you as that trust transfer, as a permanent or an interim? And then you develop another team member underneath you to kind of transition it? Or do you see yourself oftentimes as a permanent ongoing role and as a fractional leader?
Super question. I think it varies by advisor, but for me personally, it is always my objective to work my way out of a job. So in an instance, if I'm working with a client where we're building out some of their infrastructure to make them more scalable, we're getting the team in place, et cetera, they may not be in a position to really afford a full-time sales leader at this point. That's great. I can do that for a period of time where we want to get them ramped up so they can justify their own permanent role, where I can help source them and onboard them. Because I never want to be that part-time employee that always is sort of there, that contract person. There's too much need out there, and it doesn't really suit kind of the way I want to do. I want to get people in a great place, always maintain that relationship, but I want them to be independent. So eventually I leave them and say, that was fun, guys. Fantastic. please go on and consider me a resource forever. But now you're on your own and I can go out to help other people. That's really what gets me excited, is never to be there too long. It might speak to my OCD a little bit, but really there's so much need out there. And I just love meeting more companies that need help and helping them. And I can't really do that if I just kind of stick around a client. So that's how I do it. I know other advisors do it differently, but that's really that's kind of like my mode of operation for sure.
Yeah, I think I see it the same. There's different advisors have different approaches. I know at your CMO, when we look at these engagements, our initial focus is on a 2-year wildly important goal that we set, that we believe is worth the investment in a fractional leader to get us to that point. It's usually some sort of pivot or some big scale or some big internal at a project that's driving this need for senior level marketing expertise that they've never had before. And once we achieve that, that's the time then to pause and say, okay, do we have a new goal? Is there a new 2-year push, a new big effort? Or now that we're here, is it more management throughout? And if it's more management throughout, then we can bring in, or we have already developed an internal management that doesn't necessarily have to be that strategic expert leader, but can manage to put the systems that we put in place and continue to develop into that role over time. So I think it's a great it's a great opportunity for business owners to access these resources to either be transitional or in some cases we have clients that were there 4 to 6 years already doing big work every couple of years, big pushes.
Yeah, and that's it kind of reminds me of one thing that I really love doing, and it's funny because looking to the C-suite, sometimes there's often confusion about sales and marketing. Same thing, related, same hat. How does all that work? And we have to remind them that they are completely different. They must work extremely well together, but very, very different. And that I love it when I am collaborating with another partner, like your CMO, in an engagement, because when we collaborate on the client's behalf, I feel like we really even elevate the amount of value we can add because we're really teaching and really brainstorming on what's best for them. And it could very well be that, yeah, I can do my thing. I'm around for a year. They're all set. They're good to go. But they may have a very long-term relationship with, say, your CMO, which would be fantastic and it makes sense. So just giving them exactly what they need. And again, going back to that, when we're collaborating together on a client's behalf, I love that because our success is 100% gauged on our ability to help them get what they want. So there's no other agenda other than helping them. It's not like, oh, I want to do it over there because it's good for me. That doesn't matter. What's great for the client, and we do that together. That's just so incredibly satisfying.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of alignment that has to happen within an organization to be successful between marketing and sales. And that's why we work so well with SalesX. And we have the opportunity to bring those leaders in to help support that alignment. So how long have you been a fractional sales leader?
So my fractional sales adventure has been about 3 years. I came to this because I've been a consultant for about 10 years. And prior to that, I actually took over the SBDC in my local county in Florida. And it couldn't have been the best thing. Now, I did discover I'm not a government person, and that's okay. But I had strategic client, because it was all during the pandemic, I had strategic conversations with about 175 companies. And that was that aha moment that I realized how much need is really, really out there and how I can do it. And so when I decided to hitch my wagon to sales acceleration, it seemed to make sense at the time. And it was one of those things that about 6 weeks into it, you realized, this is what I was meant to do. And this is exciting. So that's just great. And I know that this is what I'll do for the rest of my career. I'll probably always work because I just love it. I don't golf. I don't do anything else. This is what I do. This is enjoyable for me. So it's been a blessing and I am extremely grateful.
What have you learned about yourself as a leader from being a fractional leader over the last few years that you would say is specific to the experiences you had as a fractional? I think it's a different way to lead. It's a very decentralized, remote, hybrid role it's unlike anything that's previously been out there. What have you learned about yourself to be a better leader from that experience?
I've learned that really a lot of what I used to do, and this is the entrepreneur in me trying to kind of put down those things where having so many different details that I handle, I have learned that to be an effective fractional, because I have to be a coach, a confidant, I have to be an analyst, and I have to be an implementer. That's a lot of stuff to do at the same time and be effective. And I can only do that if I, to your point, earn the trust of my C-suite person, whoever I'm working with. And I found that if I can let go of all of those details, things that I always put my fingers into, and really leverage some of my partners, I have a virtual assistant, I have other partners that help me. When I'm really just focused in that area, I've become really super effective, but only insofar as I can keep those other distractions at bay. And so it's the entrepreneur kind of collective brotherhood. We all struggle with that. And so I have found that I am most effective when I can get rid of a lot of the details. And unfortunately, I like doing it. I'm quick. Oh, I can knock that out quickly. I can do this. I can do that. And I have to kind of slap my own hand and say, why are you doing that? You're doing $10 an hour work. What is that all about? And so that kind of realization, I realize that I'm far more effective when I do that. And I work on it, I work on it all the time. I've gotten much better, but it's a journey. You continue to work. You're always a subject of your own nature. And I try to realize that.
I've been in the fractional space 8 years, and I've seen it change a lot. We were one of the first fractional marketing companies to come on the scene. Now there's probably 10,000 people that call themselves fractional CMOs. And I think that's it's good for business owners to now have so much choice. It's raised awareness of the fractional leader as a real opportunity for C-suites to expand in those different focus areas affordably and get access to really talented leaders. But it also has put a lot of, I think, confusion into the marketplace. What is fractional leadership? What is fractional doership? What is the difference? In your experience over the last few years, what have you seen that really separates a true fractional leader that brings strategy and expertise from maybe other fractional doers that are just hanging a shingle and calling themselves a fractional leader, but might not have the experience or credibility to really fit that role?
It's a great question. I've seen the mistake where it's funny. It is really kind of a selling mistake. We are seeing that. So many people were formerly middle-level managers who are now fractionals, right? It's just they have some level of expertise. But what I see out there is an awful lot of, again, using AI and the scale of it, lots of emails, lots of LinkedIn messaging, just volumes and volumes of stuff so that the area just becomes really overwhelming, just trying to sort through that. And kind of to your point, how do I select a fractional? Who's good, who's not? And I found that authenticity of explaining who you are and never taking the approach of, hey, this is what I do, want to buy it? It is such a mistake, right? It's a 101 mistake where we say, before you talk about what you do, you need to get to know somebody. Number one, do your homework. Figure out if this is an ideal prospect. It may not be. You should have your criteria set up and say, is this somebody you could help? And if it is, then great. You reach out. You ask questions. Once you get when you get some answers, you have to ask more questions to find that granularity, to really look like a professional where you're doing the investigative work to see if there's an opportunity. And I tell people in my conversations, I have tons of them every week, maybe 10% ever go anywhere. But most of those conversations, I've given them a nugget of something to try, or, hey, maybe you do that. There's nothing I can really help you with, but you might want to give that a whirl. Try to be a human. So that authenticity, really getting it. So that's that part of the fractional side of it. When you conduct yourself in that fashion, it looks so much more professional and engaging. If you're just saying, I'm a fractional and I can do this, you should hire me. Not very compelling. You really have to be authentic, do your homework, and make sure that you're talking about what the client needs and not you. I've seen the mistake even in the organizations that I'm in. Sometimes people come in and it's about, wow, this is great. If people just know what I do, they're just going to buy it. And say, it doesn't work that way. I'm sorry.
What are some of the things you would tell a C-suite leader or CEO or owner to really hone in on when they're trying to select a potential fractional leader for their business, whether it be a sales leader or other fractional leader? What would be some things that you would say, definitely look for this?
So, number one, you have to be prepared for that hunt. So you need to know your strategy and precisely what you're trying to accomplish, and really have done some homework on what your gaps are. What are the things that are holding you back? So you need to know that before you go out there, because just sort of shopping for a great sales manager, et cetera, is just too nebulous. There's no way you can do it. So you have to do that. The other piece is kind of look to what people are saying about them. So use LinkedIn to its advantage. See how they're commenting. Are they posting on a regular basis? Do they have a lot of recommendations? Have people said nice things about them? Can they recommend, or can they display past projects that they've done where they've helped people that are relevant? Those are all critical, because your credibility before you even have that conversation is probably in question. So you need to put that away. So you have to be authentic, be able to prove yourself, and have all of on LinkedIn, make sure that people are saying nice things about you, because generally, if you're doing a good job out there, you've got a lot of accolades that you can draw from. If somebody can't provide that, either they may be too new or they just haven't done a good job. So if I'm in a C-suite, I want somebody that's been there, done that. They're good at what they do. They challenge me, and I know that they can deliver great results. If I get an inkling that that isn't really the case, I'm probably moving on, because to your point, there's a volume of us out there for sure.
Yeah, I think those are good areas to focus on. The other items that I like to share with potential C-suite leaders and CEOs and owners is that you definitely want to find somebody who is a full-time fractional and not a part-time fractional. And what I mean by that is there are people that are working a full-time job and trying to do this on the side. That doesn't work. There are people that just got fired from a full-time job and are trying to do this interim, and that doesn't work. You want somebody that is committed to a fractional way of life, as you said, a business that they want to integrate with their lives and have chosen this path and are full-time committed, because then you get the right fractional. They understand those dynamics and they want to be in that dynamic environment. The other thing is I warn leaders to look out for what I call the posers, the agencies that pose as fractional, or have someone posing as a fractional leader just to sell agency stuff.
Yeah,
we see this in the marketing world. A lot of fractional leaders are actually selling HubSpot or selling services, and the fractional strategy is to sell stuff. And that doesn't work. And I see it in the IT space as well, fractional CTOs and CIOs that really have a service they offer that this is just biz dev for them. There's a healthy amount of, bringing services and bringing solutions with you, because your experience, you have the vendors, you surround you. Like, as long as you can stay fiduciary and unbiased, that's great. But when it starts to be, somebody who's putting themselves out there as a fractional leader, that's really just biz dev person, that's a danger as well. So I think those are a couple areas where, as C-level CEOs and owners start to evaluate options, looking for some of those posers and some of those part-timers is really important. The last thing that I see a lot, and I'll be curious if you see this, at least in our world, we see a pedigree CMO, where somebody I've been in the ivory tower for a long time. I carry a lot of weight, and therefore I'm a fractional now, and you're going to pay a big price for it. But they're afraid to do anything anymore. Like, they've been so far removed. And in a fractional role, you can't just sit there and delegate and tell people what to do. You don't have a huge resource, a team around you that is your director or your manager. You got to get your hands dirty in this role, no matter what the size of the company is. And I think sometimes people will buy that pedigree and not understand that they're not actually going to get anything done. They'll get some real value because those people are successful and they brought with them a big resume, and some strong connections. But it's not, in my opinion, the best fit for a fractional service. What are your thoughts on those?
Yeah, well, you struck a nerve with both. On that last point that you're making, we see that sometimes too, that if you've spent a whole lot of time, as you say, in the glass tower, you've been in the executive suite, and let's say you're a sales consultant, it's possible you never carried a bag, and meaning you were actually on the street, because there are elements of the sales game that are very difficult and hard and painful. It's just the nature of the beast. But if you haven't done that, it's really difficult to have the full credibility, because you are teaching not only the C-suite, but in your engagement, you're teaching the entire organization. And so you really have to understand those. The other piece that I mentioned about it is, if you're just shopping for fractionals, you can snow people with some decent marketing or a good profile on LinkedIn that maybe you seem like you're really more than you are. And I find that as part of my responsibility too, because, and like you, I work with a lot of referral partners of all different disciplines, get to know them. And really, it's only a handful of them that become my close connections, because we were kind of the same pitch. That's what we are, and we believe in it. And I find that a responsibility to my clients. And the joke I tell is, when I come into an engagement with all of this knowledge, clients like, wow, you're amazing. This is so incredible. How do you know all this? And that's neat. 90 days into the engagement, they just think we're good. It's not quite as amazing anymore. And I say that's an opportunity with your peripheral vision in the organization. If there's something in my area, sales, that needs some attention, chances are something else does, probably marketing, maybe accounting, who knows. And I'm going to become at least knowledgeable of what those are. And that's an opportunity to add more value to the client by inviting one of my partners into a conversation with my client and say, I trust this person. I think you're going to have a cool conversation that could really lead somewhere, and I recommend you have it. When I do that, I'm doing the work of vetting in a way for the client, but I'm bringing somebody I trust to the table, which means a lot. And that usually means when I bring that partner in, they're going to get to know each other, but that's going to be probably a proposal, that sort of thing. So I think that that's a way we add value too, is not just the work I do, but also recommending in the people, the professionals that are trustworthy and can deliver value.
That's great. So tell me a little bit about yourself, Tom. You don't like to golf. You like to work with businesses. You like to work. What else do you like to do?
I do. So family's everything with me, or for me. I was fortunate that my wife was a teenage mom, and she was married for a while, and then she ended up with two lovely girls, and we got married. So I ended up inheriting two wonderful teenage girls, and now I have 5 grandchildren. So I get to be the young grandpa, and they are overachievers. So I just absolutely love them. And I warned them. I was like, I'm just fascinated by the younger generation. So don't mind me if I'm always asking questions, because I love your perspective. So that's the most joyous thing to do. And again, thanks. We're on the cusp of Thanksgiving, so it's like my favorite holiday of all time. But for me personally, it's really my wife. My wife was a consultant her entire career. Now she's retired. She helps me with my practice on the accounting side, thank goodness, because I'm a lousy accountant. And so that works really well. But I enjoy that. I do work, but we do ride motorcycles. I play terrible guitar, but I do a lot of it. And we love to travel. So any opportunity that we can do it, we usually take 3 or 4 trips a year. And we're just kind of checking off the bucket list little by little. And that's what we love to do. And I'm an amateur photographer. So when we travel, that's usually when I'm without all the gear. So that's what we do. We live here in Florida. Most of our family is nearby. My wife is very clear. I was a corporate nomad. I moved her many times. And she was like, we're not moving anymore. We're staying in Florida. And I said, I'm completely on board. So love it here. Love what I do. And I love, I'm very, very blessed. And again, being on the cusp of Thanksgiving, it reminds me how thankful I am of everything.
Yeah. I recently became a grandparent. My oldest daughter had a baby boy about 5 months ago, and I jokingly say she was old enough to have a baby, but I'm too young to be a grandpa. That's right. I wasn't ready for that, but now that he's here, it is a lot of fun. And at 5 months, for those of us that have had kids and now grandkids, that stage starts to become really fun and nice to be around. They live a little bit far away. They live in Philadelphia. We live in Omaha, so it's a challenge to get up to see them as often as we'd like, or them to get here. They're coming home for Christmas though, so we'll have a nice little visit for about a week over Christmas. Yeah. So,
oh man, what a ride. You're going to love it. It is a lifetime. And the relationship as they get older between grandparents and grandkids is really special. Very good.
Yeah, I know I had a very special relationship with my grandparents, and it was important for our children to have good relationships with their grandparents. And I see that happening. And I'm excited to continue to learn what that's like as a grandparent.
So cool.
Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah. Well, in the spirit of Thanksgiving, thank you for being here today, Tom. It's been a great conversation. I'm really excited about our continued partnership with SalesX and you and our team. So thank you for being on the show and sharing your wisdom with us. Thank you very much.
Oh, Joseph, thank you for having me. You've been a wonderful host. I really enjoyed it.
And thank you to our listeners. I appreciate you. Not sure you'll hear this before Thanksgiving, but you'll likely hear it afterwards. So have your happy holiday season. And don't forget to push the subscribe button and subscribe to the podcast for more conversations like this. My producers always remind me to remind the listeners to hit subscribe. So looking forward to more conversations with you in the future. Happy holidays and thanks for listening.
And that's a wrap. There's another successful episode of the Fractional C-Suite Retreat. See our show notes and more episodes at fractionalcsuiteretreat.com. This podcast is sponsored by Your CMO, helping organizations grow, save time and money with better marketing strategy and fractional execution. Visit them at yorcmo.com, yourcmo.com. Spelled wrong on purpose.